Hello everybody and welcome to the Gyrocopter Flying Club. In this film we're going to look at Auto-Gyro's Calidus. Calidus was released into the UK in 2010 and it became the third aircraft from the company, following on from their popular MTO3 and MTO Sport models. It's another tandem two-seater, except this time it's enclosed. That huge canopy certainly gives it a distinctive style. For many, it looks like a mini military jet, but it also makes it extremely aerodynamic, and that makes this aircraft not just the most sporty looking, but also the most sporty performing gyroplane you can buy on the market today. This is a 2019 aircraft, although it actually remains quite faithful to the original. And if we look at the red sport in the background, you can see it also incorporates Auto-Gyro's new corporate identity of a black graphic on the base colour. In Calidus, it also extends to a roof sunshade, which does provide welcome relief, especially in European summers, because although in Calidus the canopy gives it a unique styling and also practically allows it to be very aerodynamic, it also means that with the canopy closed during taxi and pre-takeoff run-up checks, the cockpit temperatures can get very high. Auto-Gyro have tried to alleviate things with a couple of fresh air vents on the starboard side and a clear view panel on the port, but unfortunately during taxi the airflow just isn't sufficient and your only option is really to crack the canopy, but that leaves you with managing stick, throttle and now canopy at what is quite a critical part of the flight. From an engineering point of view, the canopy is actually very impressive because both fit and optics are exceptional, and whilst you do get some internal reflections, I think with a canopy this size it's to be expected. If we look at undercarriage now, you'll notice that the Calidus undercarriage is a reasonable bit narrower than it is on the new Sport and Cavalon, and also with a more aerodynamic style. And that's not just a styling feature, that's practical, because the overall raison d'etre, if you like, of the aircraft is aerodynamic purity to increase cruise speed and efficiency. This aircraft actually, from a tailplane perspective, has now got a bigger tailplane than 2017 Sport, and so depending on whether you transition from an old aircraft or the new one will depend whether that becomes an item of note. The prop is an IVO adjustable, it's an electrically adjustable prop, so there's a control, effectively rocker switch in the cockpit where you can fine for takeoff, landing, course for cruise and save some litres. The other thing of note are the access panels. If we have a look at, for example, this is the oil hatch, inspection hatch. This is the main top deck, bottom deck, and they're sort of sprung loaded screws which need, well, if you're in Europe, a Swiss Army knife multi-tool. I suppose in the States you guys like Leatherman or Gerber. We do have them in Europe, it's just, I guess it's just a popular brand. Anyway, unless you've got that kind of thing in your flight bag, you're going to be stuck, and really it gives an excuse to not do a thorough daily inspection. As we move into the interior, we can see the usual, it's a fairly standard Auto-Gyro sort of setup with consistent switchgear, rotor tacho, engine tacho, and then engine T's and P's on the right. Just come around to the right and look at these hinges for the canopy, and it's a big problem, especially if you're buying a used Calidus, because of the heat with the canopy closed, people are often encouraged to taxi canopy open, and of course those hinges take all of the heavy lifting, and at some point they'll just crack out of the bodywork. And that's especially true if the aircraft's being operated on grass. As you can imagine, operating these things off a bumpy grass strip, that canopy, apart from the strap at the rear, which you can just see holding the canopy up, all of the weight's on those hinges. If I just turn the aircraft master on and illuminate airspeed indicator and altimeter, you can see it's that consistent auto-gyro switchgear setup with engine RPM, rotor RPM, bunch of alarms. There is one additional alarm on Calidus, which is canopy, which basically illuminates if the canopy latch isn't successfully locked. And then does another additional gauge is manifold pressure. That's because this is a 914 powered aircraft, obviously with that adjustable prop. The pedals are not adjustable. The way that Calidus is modified, if you like, for different sized pilots is this adjustable area of the seat, which is basically an Allen key bolt in various holes, and you're basically just moving the backrest fore and aft. Just to mention, this is the throttle linkage that goes back to the instructor throttle setup in the back. In the pilot seat, you've got throttle, brake, choke, which is all consistent auto-gyro and should be familiar. One mention on that linkage to the instructor throttle is that as people get in, they can often lean on that, and of course it's only in light aluminium and it's easy to bend. There's the rudder pedals for the instructor in the rear, and just to mention in the rear, the seating, as you can see, is quite an angle, and it puts quite a lot of weight on the lower back. And I think over the years, Auto-Gyro have tried to change this by effectively changing thickness and type of foams in the rear seat, just because normally in the original, after about an hour, you'd pretty much had enough. The other thing of note in the rear is all this strapping, and these are the pilot's safety belt. The right hand one needs to be latched separately after the passengers got in. This is the seat stay. So that strapping is really the only thing that keeps the backrest of the pilot from falling on the stick in the rear. So you can imagine, in terms of daily inspection, that becomes a real critical check, because I don't think it's ever happened, but of course you can imagine if the seat does fall on the stick, that's going to ruin your day. Calidus is a 560 kilo aircraft. I think the base weight of this one, as it happens, was about 308, so that gives you an idea of headroom to the max all up. In the rear we've got a couple of nice storage lockers. That's big enough certainly to carry bottles of oil, or not really a bag. Same in the front. You know, it's either engine or aircraft logbooks or a chart, maybe some sunglasses. Baggage, really, if we look in the rear, you can see where this headset is. What tends to happen if you're going on longer trips, where that headset sits, you end up sitting with your arm on soft, squashy bags, and that's really where the majority of the storage is in Calidus. And I just want to come around the other side of the aircraft and show you, for me, it's possibly, along with the heat, one of the worst elements of Calidus. This is the fuel sort of sight glass. 75 litres tank capacity. But what happens is that over time, that sight glass, it becomes very difficult to read, because the internals of the tank pull away from the external sort of clear view panel. I mean, this is a new aircraft, and if we try and find out how much fuel is in there right now, the fuel's just down here, I can see, and you probably won't see that on the film, but I imagine that over time most Calidus owners find that one of the worst features, because of course not knowing what your fuel is or fuel state is a real pain. I'm sure Auto-Gyro might say, well, you've got a fuel gauge, but I have to be honest, that fuel gauge is, you know, it's like a chocolate teapot, to be blunt. And incredibly, there is no dipstick offered by Auto-Gyro just to dip the tank, you know, like you would do on an aerobatic aeroplane, for example. So knowing the fuel state is quite tricky in the end. Value of these aircraft, there's plenty on the market in the UK at the moment. Actually, they're all low hours, mid 50s. This aircraft is just over 100 new, and that's because UK sterling is completely destroyed over Brexit. This aircraft, obviously a new aircraft, has got the top rotors. The one thing I've not mentioned actually, and that's VNE. VNE in Calidus is 120 miles an hour, so that's consistent with Cavalon that's out right now. However, this will happily sit all day at 110, and because that comfort issue in the rear, they do make exceptional sort of one-up tourers. If you're going to fly two-up, I'd probably recommend Cavalon, just because you'll retain the friendship of whoever you take with you. Interestingly, there's no 915 option for Calidus because it's already easily able to reach VNE with a 914 and performance is stellar. The only competition comes from ELA. There's no Magni competition. And there you go. There's Calidus 914. Excellent aircraft, especially one-up.